City of Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting, recorded November 12, 2019.
We will call this meeting to order at 6:08. Thanks for attending the November 12th Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission for Stevens Point. We just got back from a walking audit, and we're going to move right into our agenda for the next regular meeting and start with a roll call.
Rourke?
Here.
Fehrenbach? Here. O'Mara?
Here.
Dugan?
Here.
Fischler?
Here.
Corbin?
Here.
All are present, which is a first in quite some time.
All right. It was the cold that drew him in, I guess. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, so moving on to the second agenda item, persons who wish to address the committee for up to 3 minutes on a non-agenda item. Is anybody from the commission or the audience that likes to testify?
I have.
Oh,
Okay.
doesn't matter.
No, later.
Alder Jennings?
I could do it one, too.
I was just going to make the suggestion that the time of the meetings be moved earlier, back to an earlier time, just a suggestion.
Thank you. Definitely a good suggestion. Commissioner Mara.
Transportation Research Board just got a interesting study on the cause of bicycle fatalities. And the overwhelmingly top cause is people getting hit from behind. And that may be a deal for us to look into as we do safety promotion, because the requirements for visibility to the rear of a bicycle are very minimal. All they need is a reflector. And for self-preservation, maybe we should be saying maybe you want more.
Good point. Is that a study you can share with the commission too for additional information?
I'll try to get a copy of it. I'm not a member of TRB anymore, so I'll have to talk to some colleague
Finagle,
that
okay.
has it.
Commissioner Dugan?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I've been using Stanley Street a lot since the restriping, sometimes as a bicyclist, but mostly as a motorist. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about maybe doing some tweaks. There are two things. A constituent who I think is accurate, because I have this problem too in accessing with the 2 lanes. Well, I had difficulty accessing with the 4 lanes, but he's having even more difficulty with 2 lanes, probably because they're closer together during rush hours. I went back and took a look at some of the discussion earlier before we did the restriping, and one of the possibilities would be to perhaps create a gap somehow, so that they're not all bumper to bumper almost. The gap would be, some kind of traffic control at an intersection. That's expensive if we're talking about lights, so I don't know. It's just something that I've experienced, and I expected Stanley to provide greater access, and it's not always. And I expected Stanley to calm traffic, and that's not what I'm experiencing either. In fact, I've had a couple of pretty serious, not serious, but close calls just in the last 2 days with cars that I was going 30 and 35, where I was supposed to, and cars were right on my tail. And instead of moving back a little bit, then when I put on my turn signal to turn right into where I live, both of them just sped up and roared around me. And I mean, it was a real, it was scary. They were telling me something. So they used the turning lane to roar past me as I was turning right. People aren't going as slowly as I'd hoped that they would. It's still a wide street, and at certain places it encourages people, I think, just by the way it looks, to go faster. And they're accustomed to it after years, so. Anyway, those are my experiences, and anything we can do to encourage a little tweaking would be
Okay, thank you.
appreciated.
Something to potentially look at in the future?
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other persons that wish to speak on a non-agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, the report of the September 10th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the report?
I move to approve.
Is there a second? Keely seconds.
I second
Officially.
it, sorry.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 No, any opposition? No abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item 4, discussion of the walking rolling audit. Okay, great. So thanks again for those that came out with us and bore the cold, and that was refreshing. Oh, someone said minty. Minty. It was minty. I thought that was nice. Yeah, so that was our first try, first go-ahead. That was the route. Thanks for pulling it up, Kyle. You can see on the screen there the route we just took, just to get some baseline looks at the street level, the eye level. And there was some feedback, but on page 8 of the, well, you might actually be able to find it, Commissioners, the toolkit from the ARP guide.
Yeah.
Page 8 has a debriefing, so we'll just go through that really quickly. And some of the points we'll pull up. Let's see here. I have it printed. You got it, nice. I'm gonna grab that. It's on my computer. Doesn't help.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just basically some questions for not only the commission, but also staff, as well as anyone in the audience that wants to present some more feedback. So a question that comes up is, what kind of road users did you see? In other words, different ages or levels of mobility, including ourselves using the sidewalk and streets. People getting around in bicycles, walkers, skateboards, etc.
A lot of middle-aged people.
Not just us, okay? We're not talking just
Are you talking about
us.
us?
Yes.
Okay. Any other feedback on the users? of
And
the
there were some
street?
young adults, too.
Some young adults, students,
Other pedestrians, and I saw bikes, another bicyclist aside from Bill.
Yeah, I
Aside
saw-
from Bill,
I actually
yeah.
saw a couple of bikes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lighted,
I think I saw 3.
a lot of student traffic on foot.
Cool. What did you see that worked well in the corridors that we walked and rolled?
I think that the city has been doing a remarkable job of maintaining those sidewalks. Seeing, we're talking about replacing most of them when the reconstruction, and they were in very good shape for their age and their part in the cycle. You know, there was, you know, a couple minor tripping hazards, but I don't think that we had any differential more than a half an inch. And I think the general condition was in pretty good shape. And except for one guy, most people were doing a really good job had cleared their sidewalks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There was one guy that you could tell had been sort of sloughing off.
A couple icy patches.
Yes.
Anyone from the audience on what worked well? How about things that need improvement? One thing we did talk about during the walking audit is there were a number of block-long streets that didn't have enough lighting.
And I-
Specifically Price and Sims and College.
Mhm.
We found that there was not enough lighting. So that's a potential
And the
improvement.
lighting we have is not uniform, and so you know, you can have a lower level of lighting, if it's all uniform. But we were going from high lighting at the intersections to lower lighting, then higher lighting. That's more difficult than if you have a more uniform level in there, because that was all done with corner lighting.
It's probably, and Scott could probably speak to this more, but it's probably a little more difficult right at the periphery of the campus, because it's probably the most intense lighting in the city, I'm guessing.
That's true.
No, but even
For a
along
reason.
the campus, we could try to, if we were
Kinda bleed
doing
into
lighting,
it.
is to get it so that it's
More transition.
more uniform.
Sure.
Because it was going from dark to light, dark to light. That's hard for motorists to see pedestrians in that sort of light, and it's harder to see the sidewalk in it. Because your eyes don't, pedestrians have an easier time having their eyes changed because they're moving slower, but.
I think, just as a suggestion, maybe do it when it's a little warmer and a little lighter. So
Summer sounds great. Summer sounds great.
maybe get a little bit more feedback on, and see a lot more too, just. But it's our first one, so it's a learning experience, so.
It's kind of also nice, I'm not promoting this for next time, this date. Kind of nice to see what it's like at night.
Yeah.
See what people are up against while they're walking, rolling. Seeing how visible crosswalks are, or if they don't exist. So it's kind of good to see that too, or not see it.
I was on one of these with Federal Highway Administration's central office, and I asked them if they had ever done an audit in winter. And they never had, and they knew of none in the whole country, so we may be the first one.
All right.
Write that in the books.
Dun, 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 dun.
It is on public record now.
Public record.
And I was criticizing for not doing it in winter, because you don't get to see accumulation of ice and some other things.
Right.
Thought there were some places where foliage could be cut back. It was encroaching on the walkway.
Yeah.
There were a few areas of transition from sidewalk to street that were narrow and too steep.
Okay. John, do we need to, get her on microphone or not? Is it required?
Should.
Okay. Sorry, if you're able to come up to.
That's all I had.
You
I
can
love it.
summarize her comments, Trevor,
All
if
right.
you'd like.
We'll summarize. Okay, if you could say that again. Say it again and I'll summarize.
I said there was some areas of transition between the sidewalk and the street where the curb cuts were a little bit, and the flares were too steep and the sidewalks looked a little narrow.
So, very good point. Someone from the audience had mentioned that the curb cuts are not as smooth a transition in certain intersections. So that can be hazardous to pedestrians and
I think the big
Walkers,
thing she
rollers.
said was narrow,
too narrow.
because they get so narrow, you can't even get a snow shovel in there. Or a snow blower.
Well, 36 inches is the minimum,
Yes.
so I didn't have my measuring stick with me, but some of them.
Next year.
Yeah, some of them look to be closer to 30 than 36.
Okay, so just to summarize that point, some of the curb cuts look like they might have been 30 inches as opposed to 36, which is the minimum for ADA compliance. Correct? Yes? Yes? 36, is it still 36? Do you know?
Yes.
Believe so? Okay.
There's some funny design details on the curb ramps.
All right, before we move into more of a summary of the entire observations that we made and go through a rating process, which is really quick, is there any specific feedback on the conditions of the street, the users, your experience, environment, anything else?
I think all the,
Okay.
we saw a lot of curbs that were in real bad shape, to the point that if anyone were to step off them, especially on Praise Street, they could injure themselves pretty badly. And then on, is that east, the one in front of the university? In front of the Dreyfus Center?
Fremont?
Fremont.
Yeah.
On Fremont Street, there was no curb line left. They had filled in the street with asphalt. which means that you're going to have ice there, and people will be walking through water, and there'll be water up on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So we certainly want to reestablish those curbs to 6 inches.
You also made the comment too of the detection warnings on the sidewalks.
It's better to have them square rather than going out into the intersection at an angle. Because the people that have sight difficulties get aimed towards the middle of the street instead of across the walkway.
Right, so the point was made in the audience, for those listening at home or later, is that the detection signal, did you say?
The detection markers on
Detection
the
markers.
sidewalk.
Yep. So those, you can choose different styles and even multiply them. So a lot of them are single, but the single, as Commissioner O'Meara pointed out, aligns people that might have a difficulty with seeing towards the middle of the intersection as opposed to the crosswalk. So that's a little bit of a potential issue.
You try to do the
Point.
best you can with those based on what you have.
Okay, any other specifics? Okay. We'll move into the general observation. So there's some different steps and ratings. So basically the ratings are, excuse me, excellent, good, fair, and poor. And we're just looking at the entire corridors that we walked through. So we're not going to go street by street. Don't really have much time for that, unfortunately. But we're going to think about the entire experience that we walked today. So as far as the condition and rating of crossing streets and intersections, would you say that was excellent, good, fair, or poor?
I'd say it was fair.
I would say good/fair.
Good, fair, good, fair. Anyone from the audience as well?
I'm hovering around good, fair.
Good, fair. Okay, we're going to go in between the two then.
Fair.
Sidewalks, would you call them excellent, good, fair, or poor?
They were pretty good.
Pretty good.
They were still in fairly good shape.
Yeah.
There are some things that there are deficiencies in them, but, you know, there were no differential heights on slabs where people were going to trip, and they were all intact.
Yeah.
Okay, we're marking down good. How about driver behavior? Excellent, good, fair, or poor?
First time I've ever seen that many cars stop all at once for pedestrians.
Yes.
That was the second time we crossed, though.
Twice.
Different the first time.
Yeah, yeah. It was good.
I think,
It went from excellent
fair.
to barely passing. It was a range.
When I was pedaling up Fremont, there were parked cars, and there were cars going both ways. And when that happened, the car behind me waited.
Oh,
until
nice.
I could get past the parked car. So
Cool.
I thought, as far
That's
as
pretty-
bicyclist perspective, the driver behavior was very good.
Yeah. Nice.
okay, marking good on that. Safety, excellent, good, fair, poor. So we're talking about safety of the places we walked.
Good.
It's good.
Good.
I didn't feel unsafe on the sidewalks or anything like that.
There were lights, not a lot of them, but there were lights.
Okay, how about comfort and appeal? Even though we couldn't see everything that we might want to.
It was
In the dark.
cold.
It was cold.
A little uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable. We're gonna go with poor. That doesn't bode well
I think
for
there's no answer
redesign. How about ignoring the cold, ignoring the dark, comfort and appeal? Good, fair, in between?
I would say it was fair because we got all those places where the sidewalk is adjacent to the curb. And I don't find that to be aesthetically pleasing. As soon as they plow snow, you're gonna have slush all over the sidewalk. As soon as you get into summer, you'll have sand up on the sidewalk. I prefer to have more of a area between the curb and the sidewalk than they had.
What area
Any
is
others?
that? Like over
There are
by
a
the
bunch of
college?
them, there are a bunch
So
of
fair,
college on
Fair to
Fraser
poor,
was
poor to
really tight.
fair?
Huh?
Fair to poor, poor to fair? You think it
You could
between the
probably
two.
go good to poor.
good to poor? So that's fair. Good one. Way to compromise. All right, so fair for that one. Okay. Awesome. So that basically summarizes our observations. And again, thank you so much for coming those that are not committed to the commission in the audience. Appreciate your time tonight. And again, next time, how does August sound?
Might
Or
be too
September.
hot.
Might be too hot, right. So that's just a little feedback. We'll probably share with Public Works and Community Development, and there you have it. And, sure, if you have a question, if you're willing to come up just for that, please. And then state your name and address, please.
Here?
Yes, please.
Feels super official.
That's okay.
Nancy Keller, I work for Midstate Independent Living Choices in Stevens Point, 3262 Church Street. And I was wondering if there's going to be any kind of a survey or anything that the citizens of Stevens Point are going to be able to weigh in on what we've just experienced with the sidewalks and the issues
That's a good
that we
idea.
may have seen. So that was just what I was wondering.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
You came to the right place. Thank you, Nancy. Scott, has that been done before? Or is that something in purview, potential purview?
I'm not aware that anything like that has
I'm not either.
otherwise been done.
Okay.
We've
I
had
guess-
PIMs on certain meetings, and I think.
Right, I mean, every project, the reconstruction will have that PIM to do it, but no,
And for the layperson,
Surveyor.
it's public involvement meeting?
Project information meeting.
what was that?
I was just addressing the acronym, so public involvement meeting for those that don't know what
Yes.
PIM is. Thank you. So that is a good point, and I think, our commission could potentially look into a community survey for something like that. It could probably, as you're thinking, couple really well with this, especially for next year. But, yeah, why don't we stay in touch? Thank you. Okay, anything else with the walking, rolling audit? All right, if not, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you so much again. Looking at item 5, TAP Grant 2020 Cycle Project Proposals. I had put together a memo, which is in your packet. Very quick summary. Obviously, you can read through this, but we had, as a commission, worked through some prioritization, a model that we developed, and really in working through that, getting feedback from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and then as well, more importantly, feedback from staff. I had been talking with Commissioner Fischler about potential projects, and then her and I kind of settled on these two potentials in a meeting with staff. And then, so these two have the potential to be proposed for this next cycle. So the item, you look at number 1. So that is a 2.0, phase 2.0 of the Bicycle Transportation Network Improvement Project, which is happening next year. So, and that's actually on the agenda as well. So if you look at the map there on the screen, the markings in black, so all those black lines basically stretch the current TAP grant happening in 2020. So that's a mix of bike lanes, shared lane markings, and signage for all of those corridors on those streets. And so Stevens Point, we won that in 2016, and again, it's going to be implemented next year. Phase 2 potentially could be all the green lines. And again, as I kind of mentioned in here, in the memo, this is really a rough sketch just to get a concept and then moving forward with something. This is not the proposal itself. This is definitely not the final map. So it's really just to get the conversation and potentially move forward with proposing a phase 2 of the project. So with that, open up to the commission if there's discussion on that proposal, or if I should just mention the second proposal as well at the same time. Any preference? Okay, so we'll mention the second one. Second one is focused on safe routes to schools. And that will be looking at implementing, say, 1 to 4 different safe routes to schools project per school within the Stevens Point School District. This would be a really, to me, progressive project for the school system, and I think it would be welcomed. However, it would take more work because every school would need their feedback and their input into this project proposal. So it would take the Safe Routes to School plan, which was approved and adopted by the county and the city, take very much those recommendations, the top priorities. Those recommendations will be brought to each school, discussed with their administration, potentially teachers as well, to find out what are their priorities, if they are the same, if they've changed, et cetera, et cetera. And the budgets are very general as well, and they're based on what staff has recommended as far as value with their time. And that number is basically $350,000 or more. So if you look at the 440, the city share being 88,000, because there's always a 20% share with TAP grants. It brings us close to a $350,000 award from the state. Any questions or concerns or thoughts from the commission or staff?
I think the second one has appeal insofar as we have been doing a lot of bicycle, we haven't improved bicycle infrastructure, and so the Safe Routes to School has appeal, but we're going to have to find out just how much cooperation and communication the school district is willing to give us. I like the green proposal in that it does fill in on the bicycle facility proposal. It fills in some gaps we have. It gets some alternate routes, and it fills in some, places we don't have. So it's not that it's not valuable. I'm just thinking that the Safe Routes to School is might be their turn, but it really may, if it would be successful, have more of an impact on the safety and quality of life for the community. It's a lot more work, but I think that if we talk about bicycle and pedestrian, people are most concerned about how their children are going to walk to school.
Right. Other commissioners?
I was thinking that because I live just a couple of blocks from Washington School, and I'm the older person there, people do talk to me about getting their kids safely. In fact, to school, I've actually had people from across Green Avenue say, can we have something to help us get our kids? We shouldn't have to put them on the bus. We have a couple of people saying that. It's crazy. It's only about 3 blocks away, but because of Green Avenue, it's not safe for us to take it. And then there are other people a little closer who have said, we just need something safe. They were talking about sidewalks, and that would be in the Lorraine, Simonis, Robert Street area, where we haven't gone in there with sidewalks yet, and they're not going to like it. They didn't like the swales that were put in. I got lots of pushback from those. But then we have other people who would like it, because they know it's helpful to the families and the children. I had a woman from way over across Green Avenue say, I would like sidewalks around the school so I could walk my dog there. So, I mean, they're both, I hear more from people who are negative because they don't want it in their public right away. But there are others who simply are asking for something that would help their families, I think.
Thank you. Other commissioners on these two proposals?
I would make a motion. I would make a motion that we direct staff to contact the school district and report back if they think that it's a reasonable ask that the school district would be willing to do the sort of work they're going to have to do to get this. And if they're not, we'll do the other, but
So can you, repeat your motion?
I would like the staff to contact the school district to explore the feasibility of doing the Safe Routes to School project.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second?
Kathy, all right. Any further discussion? I would like, yeah, some staff feedback.
I just want to note that, we can certainly do that. You probably don't need to have it in a motion, right? Most motions from this body should technically go to the next level and/or their recommendations to the council. In any case, if you still would like to act on the motion, that's fine. With regards to this project, I would echo that concern that given the deadline at the end of December, or early January, to approach all the different school districts, to meet with all representatives within, or to approach all the schools, meet with all the representatives within those schools is probably going to be a difficult task, given the month and a half or less, because we'd want to save a couple weeks to write the grant. I think it would be a tall order to fill. Nonetheless, we can still certainly, the first place we would reach out would probably be just to the district office. And I think they're I forget the gentleman's name, the transportation guy there might be the first
Chris
contact.
Budzinski.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then get a feel for how they would respond to that, and then potentially we would certainly have to act very, very quickly to start setting up this meetings with individual
I think you'd almost
schools.
have to talk to the superintendent, and what he's going to say, he'd like to do it next year, which is fine, for the next grant cycle. But if we don't start it, we'll be in the same bind next year.
Sure. Do you have any feedback on the other proposal first before we move to Scott?
Not really. I think, I don't think it'll be as strong as the original proposal, just given it's kind of a phase two. And the original proposal technically isn't successful at this stage yet because we don't have the infrastructure improvements on the ground. So I don't think it would be necessarily as strong as the second proposal or as strong as the previous grant that was awarded.
Okay. Scott, can you provide feedback on those two, please?
I would tend to just mimic what Kyle always said. I think the first one, as far as just extending the network, is going to be easier to put together, easier to meet the deadline to do that, but definitely not as otherwise appealing to it. But I still think it has its merit. As far as working with the schools, I think there just could be a considerable amount of time and effort to do that. Then we'd also have to decide, too, where those monies are spent. Their interest may be more what I would otherwise argue would be monies that should be the district's monies to be spent and not the taxpayers to do that as well. So we should be looking at things that are in the public infrastructure realm in that case, too. So there just could be a little bit of time to sort those things out. It might almost sound better if it would be kind of a partnership with them to try to identify truly what the needs are and then work with them. And that may be better done in a future cycle.
Yes.
So.
Just to clarify that last point regarding staying within the public right-of-way would be part of the grant proposal, and you're suggesting they might want to step outside that for money that's used otherwise? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just otherwise make sure that we're on there. So I think it's just because of the time, constraints even too, I'm not sure what we'd otherwise identify. It'd be nice to come up with otherwise a better laid plan, I guess, to do that, to identify that we've had a process of how we prioritize these projects and why we're bringing them forward for their safety reasons and whatnot. And I think that may be a little bit challenging in the short period of time.
See, I really don't think it's feasible to get it in a short period of time, but I think what we have to do is get them so that in a subsequent grant cycle, we can get them in. Because if we keep waiting until we find out about the grant cycle, we'll never get them. Because it'll always be short.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with this, I think there's still other things even too we can, pursue that we shouldn't wait until
Yeah.
the next round is, on the website and we're downloading the application. It's a matter of getting ahead of it, so totally agree.
That's what I was getting at more than anything else.
Okay. Probably just my misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Thought you're saying, let's
And
get it
my
done.
poor enunciation.
And maybe it just comes down to, having I know we kind of already went over this with putting together different projects and everyone coming together with that. And maybe, we just take a closer look at like larger projects and then kind of getting the framework ready. So when future TAP grants become available, they're shovel-ready, pretty much. And then we've done all the groundwork before then. So maybe we just need to kind of figure out like what main projects we would kind of stack up for the next, I would say even decade, just kind of. So if anyone comes in and out of the commission, we still have these, forward movement going. So just a suggestion maybe. And that gives a lot of time for planning, working with staff, working within other timelines.
Commissioner Fehrbach,
No thoughts.
you're thinking. So, where does that leave the commission and staff then?
I think we're going to end up pursuing the bicycle one, the bike routes. But we want to start getting people working on the safe routes. I think that's an important deal, and I don't want it to languish.
So would staff be supportive of the Phase 2 proposal? If that's obviously much more comprehensive and done well.
We certainly, I think, can support it and assist with the grant application. I do want to note that with any grant application and the earmarking of dollars with the city's component, we'd need council approval, of course.
Right.
And we probably wouldn't get that until December, the third week in December. But we've been through that process once before with the 2016 application, so but just know that there's a chance that maybe council will say they'd rather not pursue this.
So really, as far as timeline of things, it would be a matter of getting the project in place and then the budget to finance for December. Finance committee, and then go through that process.
Yeah, I think, if we were to bring this to council, we'd certainly want to have a better understanding of the city's cost share.
Yep.
Okay. So do we need to act on this or just move forward as a commission and as volunteers and staff?
I think we've given them guidance, they know what we're thinking.
Okay.
You guys, again, given the approvals needed in December, you'll have another opportunity
Okay.
in December as well, prior to council.
So we have consensus that we'll move forward with the Phase 2 proposal? Oh, audience, yes? Sure, absolutely.
I may not be able to ask this, but I'll try. When we set up this original concept, it was connecting nodes
Right.
of commerce.
Yep.
The node of commerce that is not connected. So I guess if staff could, maybe I can't ask this question, but if everything were focused on just this one thing, connecting here to here, all the money goes into that one endeavor within the right-of-way. To me, that sounds like a much sexier project, but I know you've already thought lots about this. I'm just wondering, Director, if, and also planning, if there's any thoughts.
To be honest, this is actually a better question for Trevor. Question very specific that he had asked David Moret with the DOT. And we'd definitely look at it a little bit further. The concern otherwise is depending on what we're putting within that corridor, because it is DOT jurisdiction throughout there. they may not allow us to do what we're otherwise envisioning. Their purpose there would be to try to push kind of people off more towards like, Rear Ridge Road sort of approach. So we just have to work through that with them. But we can definitely investigate it. I think it's worthwhile to pursue that further. But we just need to be aware that it's not our roadway, and we would definitely have to work within the DOT's guidelines.
Do you, as far as timing of that as well, with the bridge surface reconstruction, do you see that as being the timing being an asset to this cycle, or is it too complicated to really understand that?
I'm not exactly sure, because I know I just had spoken with DOT last week in regards to, their plans there, and, I think they finally are just settling into what they've otherwise have proposed in that. I think even that, though, I wouldn't say is completely decided at this point in time. So it may be a little premature, but I'm hoping to gain a better understanding of that before Thanksgiving, because we're supposed to be talking again and see what's going on, but I may not have the answer.
If there's any daylight in the December meeting, if necessary, we could write a note to DOT as a commission and ask them to consider that, saying that we see that there's a demand for pedestrian bicycle accommodation to that area, and would they consider it and put it into their project?
And we can definitely bring that up with them.
Yeah, that'd be the way to do it, because we shouldn't be paying for that part. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodation is their responsibility on their facilities.
So with that, so it sounds like we're coming to consensus that, or potentially, that we could either do the Phase 2 or a different project connecting the Highway 10 corridor in congruence with WSDOT. And then I think almost that final decision, maybe before pursuit, is throwing it at Dave Murrett of WSDOT and potentially any other staff there, saying, which one do you think has a greater chance as far as timeline as well as feasibility?
Right, and we can look at, even seeing about what part of, things we want to do there, because we could try to even combine those depending upon this. Maybe it is a smaller-ish scale in the Highway 10 corridor that gets us part of the way there. And I think it's worth just talking to them to see, how they react to that, idea. And then kind of just even see what they might otherwise be feeding as far as the vision, which, unfortunately has been changing over the years due to financial constraints and whatnot, but it may be a possibility to kind of see what it is. I know Rich Handrick with the DOT has been working diligently on some of those concepts as far as trying to finalize, actually he's got several projects going on within the area to try to finalize the planning on those projects, so they have more definitive, decisions made that they can then provide us guidance. So as we're doing things on the fringe that abuts their jurisdiction, we can work together, because right now it's difficult when they don't know what they're doing. And we're trying to work in the area. It's hard for them to tell us, what our plans may impact there. So, but yeah, it's definitely something we can do that, and it's possible we can accomplish maybe this with some component of the Highway 10 corridor. So, and
You see, we've connected to their project with that mixed-use trail. So we could tell them, no, it's your turn, and we shouldn't have to contribute to putting pedestrian and bicycle facilities on Highway 10. That is a state responsibility, and they do replace bicycle and pedestrian facilities on state trunk highways, especially on the urban fringe. The idea is we have to tell them that we're committed to it, and we're committed to doing the connections that are our part. We've already done half of it. And that shows our good faith, and I don't think that it would change our project here, because we're already to there.
To Park Ridge.
Yeah,
Right.
we're all the way
So
up
if
to
you
the
add a leg-
hilltop.
Essentially, if you add a leg and it adds another 100,000 or 200, whatever it
Right.
is, still, like Alder Jennings was saying, this is probably now just went from an 8 to a 9 on their scale of excellence, right? Now we're
Right. Yeah,
connecting an
I think what you have
entire
up on,
node.
is up on the screen is probably, what we're going to, it's how we can then add potentially into that and work with DOT to see
Right.
how we might change that or modify it to get, either more likely be selected, make it more appealing, or even just consider sure we're kind of working within the financial constraints to make sure we want to get a sizable enough project to make it worth our while as well,
Right.
so.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions or discussion on this TAP grant cycle? Okay. We shall move on to the next agenda item then. Speaking of TAP grant, we're reviewing item 6, TAP grant draft plans for next year. Do we have anything in paper format, or it wasn't in the memo because it was just sent to us by Public Works Director yesterday?
It's the,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have one
One
copy.
copy
Do you have the link by chance in your email?
Yeah, and it's going to be off the air on Friday.
Right. So those are
I-
temporary draft.
I did look at them, they need work.
So just to cue in the audience and other individuals here, so yesterday, Public Works provided us the draft to SEH, the consultant's design for the TAP grant for next year. So we really haven't had much time, basically a day, to review a pretty extensive plan. And I think Kyle's trying to bring it up if he can. I'll mention a few notes here as we're waiting.
But this is definitely a draft because on the first page where they do the typical sections, they show the bike lanes on the existing typical section and 3 travel lanes across on Center Point as a proposed typical section.
Right.
And so I
The
think
opposite.
that these need a little bit of work.
Yeah, some concerns I had with what I saw. One was, like example on page 9, once we get to that point, if we can. Page 9 of 83, the proposed typical for Michigan Avenue between Dixon and Ellis is painted 4-foot bike lanes and 12-foot automobile travel lanes. It's actually a question for Scott. Is Michigan a designated trucking route?
I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Hey, all right. Okay, so that one question I have in the follow-up is, do you know if SEH used just the WisDOT's Wisconsin Bicycle Facility Design Handbook, or if they used like NACTO's Urban Bikeway Design Guide or AASHTO's guide? Do you know if they used all of those, or?
To be honest with you, I don't know what, all reference, that they're going to.
Okay.
For that, so.
Have you had a chance to review these?
I
chance?
have not had as much as I would like, no.
Okay. And then that gets me, Public Works had a chance to review it last night? Or was it just on the agenda for as a side note?
I'm not sure.
I think TAP grant was on the agenda.
Oh, I just gave an update.
Just an update, okay.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
it wasn't a review of these, no.
Okay. So this is basically a first look then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is there a, SH give a timeline on when the public involvement meeting would be yet?
No, not yet. That is otherwise pending the evaluation required by the DOT for connecting highway.
Okay.
So, and they're still finalizing the scope for that. And then once the plans are then revised yet, at that point in time, we should be ready for the PIM.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. Again, I didn't personally have much time to go through this over a day. I'll share a couple of other concerns and then the positive part of it. Also, so I'm seeing the word shared bike lane in a bunch of the cross sections, and that's something that doesn't exist. So it was really odd to see that. There's sharrows and multi-use paths, and even there's something I learned about today, bus bike lanes. When you got to mix users, a bus bike lane sometimes is a go-to. But a shared bike lane, I'm assuming, should be a sharrow. I'm assuming. So that was kind of concerning to see that language. Another concern I had was an example of a 2-foot bike lane proposed on page 13. I don't think that should exist.
Is that on Jefferson?
Whatever page 13 is, which if we don't have it up. Do you have that up, Michael? Page 13 by chance?
No, because the pages aren't marked on this particular.
Okay. Super rough draft. Anyway, so that's an example of a concern. I'll say one more thing before I end my comments. Overall, excited. Very excited, right? So this is a big deal for Stevens Point. It's a step in the right direction. I think we've gone decades without infrastructure like this, and it's great that we're going to have this happen. Other commissioners that have taken a look, even if you didn't have time?
I looked at it and thought,
All right,
there will
going
be
somewhere.
There'll be a lot of paint on the streets that were not on there before that will help the average cyclist navigate getting across Division on Clark and Main. It's manageable, and people are just afraid to do it right now, so this will help.
Awesome. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, when I looked at it, it's rough, but they have the right idea. No, this is what a preliminary plan looks like. And there'll be a bunch of red marks on it, and then they'll.
Keep on moving. Any feedback or comments from the audience? Go ahead, Alder Jennings.
Tori Jennings, 1632 Ellis Street. Like everyone, I haven't had time to look at this very closely, but some things that are not consistent with NACTO, for example, the intersection of Michigan and Stanley Street. So bikes are moving from a buffered bike lane into the traffic lane, basically into like a right turn lane. And NACTO would
That's right.
move the bicycles to the left of the cars, because what's going to happen here is bicycle's going to be here, and there's a right turn lane, and the bike's going to move and the car's going to hit them. That's why NACTO moves the bike, or you create a bike box, which wasn't in the plan.
This is probably more paint, more expensive, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So there's some of these turning movements that are going to, if they just put down sharrows, we're going to have right turn conflicts with the bikes. And NACTO resolves that with a different configuration of the travel lane.
Thank you. Scott, again, you didn't have time to go over this yet, right? I'm saying that because I don't want to ask you a bunch of specific questions.
No, I really haven't had
Okay.
the time yet to get through them, so.
Okay, so kind of a first look, commissioners, audience, and really timeline for feedback from the commission. So if we brought this back next month, it could be a totally new draft, I'm guessing, or would we be
I'm not sure
shared?
it's going to be totally, I'm sure they're going to do some of the cleanup, because I'm sure at the same time, they're reviewing it internally. I guess just the one thing, having been even on that side of the process and stuff, and like Commissioner Ramirez had identified, honestly, this is what preliminary plans tend to look like. I also just want to recall, if you remember, we're going through even the negotiations, setting up what it was. There was limited budget, which we even had to expand, based upon what was left over after the management consultant fees were worked in to do that. I don't know who exactly is doing these plans, but I would tell you they're probably the lowest paid person, technical person when SEH has. to do that. So, even with that said, I've been there too, you kind of instruct them how to do it, you kind of get something, you look at it, you've got a deadline, you're looking at the idea more than the true detail to things.
Okay.
At this stage. It's good though to identify all those just because they don't get missed, because otherwise what happens is it occurs in, a dozen places and it's fixed in 10 because they pick it up
Right.
and you just don't see it. That's what happens then in 2 places, it's not right. So it's nice wherever you see those to pick them up. That's always helpful.
So would
But-
you think there's some good value in commissioners emailing your department?
And I was just going to say, what I would try to do is, better, of course, if I can get them sooner, sooner I can get them to SH, the best. But, yeah, I was just thinking if everyone takes their opportunity to do that, if you just want to, send an email to that, drop it up, be fine. It's probably something we can still talk about, next month. Just kind of thinking even with the holiday coming in and SH has alluded to that there's, some of this other evaluation work they're trying to complete, on their own and or get out ahead of it, knowing that we need to do it. I think that's otherwise going to slow down. So I think by December, we're probably still in good shape to think that what we see is probably not going to be advanced
Okay.
too much farther, because they're going to be looking at some of the connecting highway stuff and trying to get that documentation together for the DOT.
Okay.
So I would think you've probably got the month to comment on it.
Okay, great.
So take your time. Be thorough. Be thorough.
As volunteers, take your time, right? Thank you, Scott.
Could you print up plans for us so we can mark them up? You don't have to go to the...
10 cents a page. You can have as many copies as you want. Yes, we can definitely do that.
What's your commission on that? Jeez.
About 3 cents.
The 3
for
cents,
me.
give or take.
So yeah, if we want to
Yeah.
do that, and I don't know, yeah, I know some people are comfortable doing it electronically in the PDF, so I guess if you want to set, if you just want to let me know, and I will
Yeah.
coordinate with you to get one.
Because then I'd redline it for you.
So.
There you go. Thank you.
That's easier to do.
All right, any other discussion or
I'll have
feedback
to buy a red pen.
on the preliminary plans, preliminary draft? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item, what item is that? The next one, the next item, 7.
Fun one.
The fun one. I don't have much
Almost printed this.
feedback on this, but it was included in your packet, asphalt art guide. So as some discussions in the past have taken different turns as far as what is allowable with the MUTCD, Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And I know that the Federal Highway Administration still has come out on paper and online against sidewalk art, specifically in crosswalks. I think this is almost like a public push. So this was a recent piece put out by Bloomberg Associates, Bloomberg Associates. And it's actually kind of like a manual and template to get this type of infrastructure in your own city, in your own town. Kind of a neat thing. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis if you want to get this done in Stevens Point, but I think it's kind of a cool educational piece where regular citizens can get involved and learn about public art on city streets and in public spaces, so. I didn't have too much about it.
I know that the Emerson Park Committee is looking upon doing the same sort of concept on the basketball court.
Oh, sure.
And there's a grant available for that we will be applying for.
Cool. I thought you were going to say the crosswalks leading to the park. That would be cool. Clark Street
I
right there?
I don't think we have any crosswalks that lead to the park.
Let's start there.
But, and I would think that the place, if I was going to say where this sort of thing would really have impact, it would be the entrances to the public square.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Staff perspective. Kyle, anything? Even though it's educational?
I think art in general in a good location is of big benefit to the city. And I don't want to speak for Scott, but I don't think he'd probably be in favor of this for every single crosswalk and every single street.
Not every single one?
You know, to the point
Kidding.
earlier about
Audience, kidding.
downtown and how can we integrate it, whether it's on public right-of-way or maybe it's just city property that may not serve the same purpose as a street does.
Right.
You know, there are certain ways we can incorporate art better than we have in the past.
Cool, thank you. Anything else from the commission on this subject? Audience? Yeah, go ahead. Please state your name and address.
Name's Lucas Rudolph, 1523 College Ave. I definitely like the idea of public art and things like that. I think it's a great idea, but when I lived in Minneapolis, I know they had a lot of bike boxes and other things that were painted, and when it's rainy in spring or early fall, they get very slick, and I actually had a pretty bad fall cutting across one of those on my bike. So I don't know if there's a certain kind of paint that would be better and more tacky or grippy, but that's just something to think about. Even the rainbow one they have in the campus,
Yep.
I've seen some people just walking and slipping because once it gets a little wet, that is like slip and slide. So
Interesting.
Just super quick, Scott, out of curiosity, as far as engineering with paint, obviously you want to use a certain paint that's kind of regulated by the standard, the stuff that has the reflectivity as well as traction. But if something like this were to happen, hypothetically, obviously we'd gear ourselves towards that type of paint. The crosswalk paint at the Pride Crosswalk on campus, do you know if that was specifically street paint or if that was more
It is
of a?
pavement marking
It
paint,
is,
yes.
okay. So, I don't know. Thanks for bringing that up, though.
Maybe a clear, gritty top coat.
Yeah, there you go. Add some sand in there, so it's like more sandpaper.
Actually, the stuff that Scott uses is a lot less slippery than the higher grade epoxy and certainly the thermoplastic paints. The stuff we do.
Thermoplastic was more textured, though.
No, it's like an ice rink. It's terrible. That's where we really have the crashes, is on the thermoplastic. It gets any ice on it, you can't stand on it.
Interesting.
But then the trade-off, though, is usually the longevity of what it
Yes.
is. So
Right.
something that otherwise is painted with just standard paint that we would otherwise use is only going to last, about a year or so. Within months, it's already going to start to show degradations, wheel paths, and of course, after winter, to plow.
Right.
So it becomes a considerable effort to keep it looking nice.
And so
So,
whatever group you have is in it for the long haul for doing the painting.
well, and that's the one thing also to keep in mind is that, most, not that they can't always change and aren't some better, but in my experience identifies that those that volunteer typically will do it for about 2 to 3 years, and then that effort usually ends. And I
It's-
think there's a lot of history with the city in a variety of different areas where that is generally held true. So even if you do get a group to step up and say, yeah, we want to do this, usually once the kind of the new wears off, which pun intended, then that group seems to lose its interest in maintaining it, and then we need to make decisions whether the city should step in and do that, whether we have the staff, the resources to do it or not. So one thing to keep in mind as well.
Definitely,
I mean, nice
yeah.
ideas, but it can quickly grow into something not very easily managed.
Well, I mean, I've always known you as an artist, so therefore,
Thank you, thank you.
you can step it up. Thanks, Scott.
Maybe we could look at some pop-up chalk installations and
Yeah, exactly, temporary chalk.
with a top coat
it's
that
not too
slowly wears
polluted.
away.
Yep, Kathy?
Yeah, just, I've seen a couple of, I've seen these, very interesting artistic crosswalks in a couple of cities in the area. I think Wausau has them downtown.
At least one I've walked
Yeah.
across, and
Yeah.
Wapaka has a
And
newer one.
Wapaka too, yeah. But in one of those places, it's obvious that no one's maintaining them. They're really fading out, and
Wausau,
that's Wausau, yeah. So, things to consider, I guess.
definitely. Any other feedback or questions on that subject? Okay. Moving on to item 8, staff update. Is there anything from staff this evening?
I have nothing for you.
Nothing for
for
us.
the commissioners. But I can't speak for Scott. He may have something.
You're getting your steps in today, Scott. That's our goal.
Don't mind that, don't mind
That's
that.
our goal.
You know, so, I guess really nothing to add. Probably the only thing would be, which didn't otherwise come to here, just a matter of how it kind of fell into place, was the sidewalk continuation. So
Okay.
my apologies that seemed to jump past this one and the others. Kind of just, there was a Alder request to get it, and it seemed to kind of just stick there for a while. But I think the otherwise council decided on that as far as what sidewalk continuation will be in 2020. Otherwise, I think we've already talked about TAP grant. We've talked about road reconstruction. So I think that's about all I have at the moment.
Okay, so for future, are you saying you want to bring sidewalk continuation
I think this would
projections
be
to
the
the
appropriate
commission?
place to bring it first.
I think
And-
so.
and all, and my thought was to bring it here, bounce it around, and then send notices to, residents about kind of what was decided and things, and let them know. This one seemed to kind of get a little out of order, just due to some residents,
Sure.
when we get out to do surveying and stuff to do it, so. It was probably the unfortunate timing, just trying to get out ahead of it at the end of the season to get
Right.
that done before I got here, and it was, that kind of just started that whole ball rolling. So hopefully next year we'll talk here before the surveyors get out into the field and start
Right.
collecting information.
On the timeline it goes.
So,
All right. Thanks, Scott. Okay, if no other staff have updates, we will adjourn this meeting at 7:14. Thanks so much, everyone, for sticking around.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Lucas. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.